focused your attention on certain restricted areas of the whole panorama of things that you experience, and say, I will take sides with that much of it. Now, we come here to an extremely important principle, which is the different points of view you get when you change your level of magnification.
In order to find your way through all of that, you need to develop a relationship with something that's profound. And you can have that capacity. And what could be more profound than the truth? And what would you rather have on your side? And to do more than your best, because your best isn't enough, because your best isn't as good as you could be. You have to push yourself past that. You find the meaning that sustains you in life, and you find the patterns of action that redeem the world.
This is what I think, man.
Okay.
I think evil's real. And I think evil exists in many forms, and it exists in callous disregard for loss of life for profit. That's evil, right? And that's a real thing. Like, you could say evil is Satan, and evil is demons, and evil is, exorcisms and shit.
Oh.
But also, evil is profit over human life, which is real. I legitimately think we are one or two events away from living in the Stone Age again. And I think it could happen in our lifetime, and it could happen to you and I. Like, I'm really convinced that the fabric of society is way more fragile than anyone appreciates.
The truth shall set you free. Truth transcends the division of this world, and we become so polarized and so tribal in today's world that many aren't even seeking the truth. They're just assuming it based on personal bias. How do we know who's even telling the truth anyways? The truth is manipulated at every turn. The way to find the truth is to actively seek it. And this is more important now than ever, given the unprecedented war on the truth and the freedom to speak the truth and shout it from the rooftops. We need to unplug from whatever side we're on and look at the big picture about our food, health, media, politics, spirituality. All of it is a war for your attention. And where attention goes, energy flows. And right now, your attention is being manipulated. At times like this, we turn towards something greater than ourselves for guidance. Philosophies, leaders, inspirational words of wisdom, some sort of light to show us the way. And there's no greater light than the light of truth. Seek and ye shall find. And when you find the truth will set you free.
When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
What exists, reality itself, is gorgeous. It is the plenum, the fullness of total joy. The universe is a celebration. It's a fireworks show to celebrate that existence is. Wow-wee.
For those of us seeking a life of meaning and purpose, capturing fulfillment in every moment of now, seeking the truths of our reality so we can live this life to its fullest. This is the Live This Life podcast. And I'm your host, E. Cummings. I'm here to inspire you to ask yourself the question every day. Are you living, or are you killing time? What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the 5th season of the Live This Life podcast. It is crazy that it's the 5th season already, and it's been a wild ride so far. I can't believe that we're starting this 5th season already, but I'm excited for what's ahead, and now it's time to really, literally get it growing. I have sort of themed these seasons over the years, and since we often have seasons of our lives, our lives tend to have a bit of a theme in certain aspects, in certain time frames, I decided to stick with those themes. I've talked about in our lives how we have those cycles and seasons, and some of those early seasons of life, we're figuring out the world around us. We're looking for security from our parents. We're just learning how to navigate the world in general, and we're then connecting with the world after about, so they're like 7-year cycles, and we're trying to connect with the world after our first 7 years. We're trying to make friends, reaching out to the world. We're discovering things, making friends. And then after that, we're developing relationships, and we're exploring everything all around us. And, these cycles tend to get a little bit more deep, and they tend to follow the actual chakra system. I've heard some of the philosophies, and if you're not familiar with what the chakras are, it's based in Hinduism and Buddhism, and it's the energy centers of the body, and there's 7 of those. And typically our 7-year cycles tend to evolve in those different aspects of following the chakras, from our root all the way up to our heart and our crown and everything. And each one of them has a different energetic meaning. We talked about this in certain episodes in the podcast in the past. And I feel like certain seasons of our life have a certain theme. So I'm sticking with it. And this season has a theme. And right now, I feel like the one I'm called to talk about the most is a season of truth. The truth seems to be so much under attack at this time that we're living in. And it's crazy. It's crazy to see. We've seen so many things, and, we were basically handed certain ways that the world was, right? We were told that, people of authority told us that we had to believe certain things, that certain things were the way they were, and we weren't allowed to question them. And we had to take certain things as gospel and not challenge the narrative that was going along out there, and pretty much just follow along with no questions asked, despite what our intuition and our gut told us. I have to say, in my life, I've never been someone who tends to follow a forced narrative, or if someone tells me I have to do something, there's an immediate knee-jerk reaction of, if it doesn't feel good, why am I doing that? If it's morally incorrect, if it's something that deep down inside, I'm like, no, I don't follow that rule. I don't like what that is, and I'm going to challenge it. I've always been that kind of a person. And the last few years have been no different. The only difference of it is that I found myself stifling myself a little bit more than I used to, for the sake of so many different things. I have jobs, I have people, I have different things in my life that I don't want to disrupt, and I want to alienate people. But unfortunately, the truth doesn't have filters. It doesn't have, discriminatory aspects to it when you're talking about the actual truth. And I guess I'm no longer willing to censor myself for the sake of how other people feel. The truth is what it is. And really, the truth has been stifled in so many different aspects of this world over so long, but primarily now. And I guess the very fortunate part about what's changed recently is that the truth is coming out in sort of unstoppable ways. The truth of our reality right now that sometimes is very inconvenient is it has been suppressed. We have been fed a whole lot of lies by a whole lot of trusted people for a very long time. And sometimes those lies that we were fed are more comfortable. And believing the lie is often sort of the easiest route because it makes us feel a certain way about the world. It's a comforting feeling and it's more secure. But believing a comfortable lie is really not the most virtuous way to live. Morally correct. When I say virtuous, it is, I guess, better to follow, in my own opinion, the uncomfortable truth than the very comfortable lie, because too much damage has been done and too many people have been hurt by just living in that unquestioned status of comfort and the normalcy that comfortable lie tends to bring us. And in my own opinion, the uncomfortable truth is the way that we're really supposed to live. But that is all subjective. It is a matter of choice. It is a matter of free will. And free will is absolutely fundamental. I will say that time and time again. It is the foundation of everything that I believe to my core. I feel that free will is an absolute. It is one of the most basic of all human traits and all human rights. And I have the personal ontological belief that we were put here to explore what it means to exist in human life, that we are somehow energetically connected back to source, and that our experience through our emotions and our actions and our relationships, the ups and the downs of life that we experience, all of it is energetically part of the all. It's part of the oneness of everything. And that we have these experiences in a way throughout our entire lives. And somehow that is sort of reporting back to the universe energetically and telling it about its own creation. If you were this all-knowing massive intelligence that I deep down believe does exist, I don't believe in a dogmatic form of it, but I do believe in something. It is grand. There is an intelligence out there that had to create the perfect order of this all. And my belief is that we are sort of the nerve cells on the fingertips of that creator, and all of our experiences basically report that energy back to the universe. If you were some all-knowing creative force, just picture you were floating in space. It's just nothing but blackness, and you create something. The whole saying in the Bible of "let there be light." Well, maybe that's the first thing that you actually create. Information is light. I mean, it's essential to having anything. So in the darkness, the opposite of the darkness would have been the creation of light. And from there, if the universe was created in that way, what spawned from that? How do you end up determining what anything is? You eventually have to evolve your creation into something. And what better of a way to do it than these flesh and blood beings that have the complicated lives that we live and have these things called emotions. And those things are all energy. It's all energy and vibration of the emotions and the thoughts that we think. And if everything is indeed connected, then we all energetically report back to something. I mean, physics is proving it time and time again. I sometimes sound like a broken record, but the physics of the entire universe is showing that literally everything is connected. Quantum entanglement is a real thing. The vibration of the fundamental particles of the universe shows that everything comes from a 0-point source. So if we're all from the same source and science is proving those things, then obviously the energy that emits from our lives and everything that we do in our entire day-to-day life is connected. So I have that belief that we are, energetically connected back to that creative source. And for what purpose? Who knows? But I've heard some amazing philosophies that talk about this, and it is definitely fascinating. And whenever I hear someone talk about it, I feel, a certain resonance with the concepts and the aspects of it. And people who have gotten deep into meditation, deep into prayer, they feel that connection to something greater, something grander. And I feel like there is something out there that is that greater source. But how else would you discover the universe if it weren't for free will? If everything was deterministic, if there was a prescribed way that we were supposed to live our life, if determinism was actually a thing, meaning we had no free will at all, that our fate was our fate, then that ultimately means that nothing is within our control, that we can't decide anything, that a higher power has prescribed a plan for us and we can't escape it no matter what. No matter what actions we take, there is no getting out of that determined path that we are supposed to be on. But we know that's not true. We can choose any path in life that we want, and we can take any actions. Granted, we may have some limitations given money and everything else. But right now, you can choose to punch yourself in the face, and obviously that choice is going to cause you some sort of pain. You have that free will. If you didn't have that free will, then your life would be completely determined by something else. And that would completely defeat the purpose of us coming here in the concept like I just spoke about. We know that determinism really isn't true because our free will absolutely does exist. We can choose any path that we want. And determinism would go against that obvious fact that we do have the choice. And it's in line and almost parallel to nihilism, which is the rejection of all religious and moral principles, that life is meaningless and it's accidental. And that thought concept just does not resonate with me at all. Even though at a certain point in my life, I would have actually considered myself an atheist or nihilist. And, I guess I always thought at a certain point that we were just another organism on this planet. I totally remember for a certain period of life feeling that way, that we were just another one of these organisms, that we just happened to evolve a little bit of a bigger brain. We got the dexterity and opposable thumbs and things that just evolutionary wise set us apart, and the whole Darwinism thing. But as years have gone on, and I've seen things that I can't explain and had experiences that can only be described as as governed by something of a higher order, and seen interventions happen and things that had to have developed in a certain way. I don't think there's any way around believing that there is some sort of a higher order and that we have a connectedness to it as well as a connectedness to everything. Free will and being a part of a massive order of projection, of perfection that obviously needed to emerge in this universe for us to even exist, for so many of the complex structures within this universe to exist. A higher intelligence had to do it. Having it happen by accident, I've heard scientists explain that would be like a 740 or a tornado going through a junkyard and creating a perfectly functional 747. That certain things that had to transpire within our universe had to be absolutely perfect for the situation and the circumstances for life to actually evolve, for planets to evolve, for anything in this universe to actually come about. There's no way that all the stuff that we see around us is accidental. And our place here is more significant than I think we all realize. And that life is not accidental. It is definitely something that has meaning. A life that is purely accidental and has no meaning and that has no connectedness to anything, or I guess the challenges that we go through and that we're presented with, they have no meaning in themselves either. We're just put here and we go through these crazy experiences and these horrible circumstances sometimes for absolutely no reason. That doesn't make any sense to me. And that existence in and of itself is so boring. And honestly, it makes no sense. To me, it's like saying 1 + 1 = 8 in my own spiritual language. And it doesn't sit with me well. Of course, all of this stuff is completely subjective. When they say reality is a subjective reality, well, that's my subjective reality. And that's the one that I've really subscribed to over the years. I think the truth about our existence, I think the truth about our history has been completely hijacked. I think the truth about why we're here, where we came from in our past, and the true power that we do possess as humans, and our connectedness to all of our potential in the universe and in this life. It's all been manipulated to keep us dumbed down, and those truths have been withheld from us for very deliberate reasons. And once I started to go down the rabbit hole, there's literally no turning back. When they say that, it's not just a metaphor. When you look at it like the Alice in Wonderland, as soon as you start tumbling down that rabbit hole, there was really no way out. And once I started to, I had to ask myself why. And that was, I guess, the inspiration for the final episode of the last season is, what if and why, and asking those questions. That was in a whole other sense. I guess I had to ask myself why the truth that I was perceiving was opposite from what I had been told. And why was that truth so hard to find? And why was there such an effort for the things that were obviously truth that we were told were completely otherwise? Why would any person with a good moral compass want to steer people away from that truth that actually can help people, that preserves their lives, to give them a more fulfilling life? And once the truth of those things manifested, of why we were not told the truth of not knowing the truth, that is what really opened my eyes up for everything. And that's what I want to talk about today. And that's where we're going to jump off in this season premiere in season 5 of the Live This Life podcast.
All supplements were not created equal. I hear other big podcasters promote superfoods and scoops of powder that are, quote, all-inclusive. Well, that unfortunately means they could include literal poisons as well. Glyphosate and other pesticides are everywhere in our food supply. Everywhere, that is, except for Organifi. They are one of the only brands out there that has this little symbol that certifies they are glyphosate free. And if you know what that stuff is, literal weed killer, you'd know how important it is to avoid it at all costs. Organifi has been with the podcast from the start, and it is a pillar in my life, and the before and after effects of its benefits are palatable, and it's what keeps me feeling and moving like I'm still in my 20s. I have people ask me, dude, what's your secret? And I tell them it's no secret, it's Organifi. Invest in your health today. Check out everything this company has to offer. Go to OrganifiShop.com and use the coupon code LIVETHISLIFE, all one word, at the checkout and save 15% off every single order. Head to the link in the show description for their products. That's OrganifiShop.com, OrganifiShop.com. Check it out.
The truth is more often obscure than not. We live in a time where to get to the truth, you have to do some serious digging. It's not served up on a silver platter by any means, and it's not right at our fingertips, despite the interconnectedness of this entire world. On the contrary, I feel like deception is bought and sold regularly, and the truth is something that is a hidden commodity. And it's too often, the deception that is out there in this world is too often gobbled up by the majority of the consumers in this world, which are the person to your left and the person to your right, your fellow human. The many who take everything on surface value without questioning a single thing. Those people are the ones who I feel like are the ones we're speaking to. The truthers who are out there, people who know what I'm talking about, too often times they're called conspiracy theorists. And that term has been demonized for so long. And every time I hear somebody parrot that term, because when I say parroting that term, it's like, conspiracy theorist. Like, people will hear that on mainstream news and they'll hear other people in their tribe talk about conspiracy theorists. So it's critical thinking, because lately there are some people who are really deep conspiracy theorists for sure. There are some things they believe, and in my own personal views are way out there, but that's me being critical of something that could end up turning out to be true, because a lot of the stuff that was demonized over the last 4 years ended up being true. A majority of it was. Like, some of the hugest heavy hitters that were out there, the stuff about UFOs, and now it's on the front page of the New York Times over the last several years. And we've got whistleblowers who are saying that they literally have off-world craft, that they were not originating from this world. You've got the stuff that came out from the Warren Commission on the JFK assassination. And as people are passing on their deathbed confessions, along with declassified CIA information that says that certain people involved were assets, the stuff that they denied for decades is starting to come true. Some of the biggest heavy hitters. And one by one, the people who were deemed these conspiracy theorists are proven that they are just critical thinkers. Because if it was just a conspiracy theory, it didn't exist. It's just a theory. It's not something that was proven yet. It turned out to be conspiracy fact. And to get there, you had to be a critical thinker to say, this mainstream narrative did not exist. It actually happened this way. Or could it have happened this way? And it's that critical thought that caused people to start to investigate on their own. And they started to do some digging. And then lo and behold, you do enough digging and the skeletons came out. And now those people who were deemed crazy conspiracy theorists were the ones who are saying, well, I guess I was right. And right now they're running a pretty good gamut on the rest of the world today. When you see some of the things that have come out, when you don't take everything just for surface value and you start questioning things, that's exactly what happens. Even just the smallest things. And there are some people who that is their nature. They just lock in step and they don't question stuff. And there's a whole demographic of people that do question things. I was brought up, despite, I guess, my mom's best efforts, she brought me up too close to her heart, because she was somebody who was a bit of a rebel herself. And it ended up translating into me. That, I guess, that was the reason why I saw so many surprised faces when I first started showing up in uniform, people who knew me, because I was a rebel myself when I was a kid. And I guess that translated all the way through. I did not go with the status quo, and it caused me issues throughout some of my career because I questioned the status of everything, despite who was telling me. If it just didn't seem right, I questioned it. And yeah, sometimes that caused some issues for me, but every time I got into one of those problems, the universe took care of me. And in the end, I ended up the victor. And that's what I'm starting to see time and time again with the people who question the status quo, is that, yes, they're demonized, and yes, they got to go through some stuff to prove their points of view, and they have to be demonized by so many people and laughed at and scoffed at. But then ultimately they end up to be the ones who were correct the entire time. And I'm not sure how many times that has to happen in this world before more people start to be critical thinkers. But I'll tell you, the shift is changing, because I'm starting to see many people who didn't question the status quo on a lot of stuff over the last few years and are very much regretting that they didn't ask more questions, because it could cost them something, and it may have already cost them a decent amount of stuff. And now people are putting their hands up saying, why didn't I listen in the beginning? And I think that's a powerful lesson to learn, because the truth ultimately does set you free, and freedom is our ultimate God-given right. And it's one that I feel like is being slowly taken away from us from people in positions of power. So if someone in a man-made position of power is trying to take away a God-given power, guess which one's going to win ultimately? I think the power on our side of the people who are the truthers, the one who are trying to preserve the freedom for everybody to exist in a way that is meaningful to them and their right to live a life that they want to live. I feel like those people are going to be on the right side of history, and that a tipping point is very nearby, and that our ultimate power, that ultimate free will, must be protected and preserved at all costs in this world right now. And the best way, I think, in my own opinion, to find a fulfilling life is to find meaning and fulfillment and to uncover the truth and get connected to it. And to find that meaning and fulfillment, if someone else is telling you how to do that, when to do it, and what it's got to look like, that's not true free will. That's not going to lead you to a meaningful and fulfilling life. And to be connected to all the other people out there, if enough people are at least keeping their mind open to the potentials, the what ifs, the potential truths that are out there, and they're seeking the truth as well, then they're going to find unity in just that questioning. But the comfortable lie of the world itself it's extremely intoxicating, just like the truth can actually be. And sometimes those conspiracy theory people who believe everything is a conspiracy theory, even recently with the bridge collapse that happened, yes, there's some shady stuff, but immediately right off the bat, everybody was like, this is garbage. And I have to say, even myself, the way that it went down, it was like, okay, at first, power failure. But on the surface, where were the guide boats? Captain was from Ukraine. There's things from Somalia or wherever it was from, Singapore. There's so many different reasons why people were immediately suspect of it. And it was one of the major ports. And we got all these other major calamities happening all around us, between rail disasters and fires and stuff that we've just never seen before. And we have more technology than ever. How's a boat hitting a bridge? So yes, those people are asking questions. Can it immediately be determined that it was illegitimate? No. Do they jump right on it a little too quick? Sometimes, in my opinion. But again, there's so much stuff that is obscuring the truth nowadays that now it's like they cried wolf. They've done it so many times, everybody's going to be suspect to everything, whether it's that or, fires in Maui aren't burning stuff that's blue. So it had to have been direct energy weapons. And there's some conspiracy theories that lead in that direction. Do I believe them wholeheartedly? No, but I at least keeping an ear open, because one thing I hate is being wrong. So I'm not going to definitively say anything's a certain way, because these people have been proven too many times recently that they were actually right all along. The world, like I said, can be very intoxicating when you believe that it is a certain way that is safe and that you're not being lied to. Just that security in and of itself is a much more comforting place than the truth can actually be, because the truth sometimes can leave you in a very bleak picture of what this world actually is. A lot of very powerful people doing a lot of really bad stuff to people that are genuinely good and innocent. And it's tough, because once you open your eyes and you put on those magic glasses, I've heard it described as that. Once you put those magic glasses on, there's a few constants that cannot be negotiated. There are several rules, and you might have heard some of these before. Let's see. I have them. I just have to look them up because I don't want to butcher them. So one of them is that you can never take off the glasses. Once you've put them on, you can never take them off. Number two is that you will never see things the way that you saw them before, and you will never see them the same as people who've never put the glasses on. And number three, you can never force anyone else to put them on as well. It's all of free will. The truth is absolutely believing in the truth and seeking the truth is all of free will. And there are those people in this world who will never put those magic glasses on, no matter what. I've heard it described as, the red pill and the blue pill from the Matrix. And it's like, you can't take that red pill and shove it down people's throat. In the movie, if you're not familiar with the movie, Where Have You Been? Things have been out for 20 years. It's an amazing movie. Even if you're of older generations, younger generations, watch the first one. All the others, they're all right. But the first movie, it's one of those ones I saw in the theater multiple times back in 1999. And I know I'm old as hell from saying that, but it was a fantastic movie. And in the movie, they have to choose a red pill or the blue pill to get out of a computer simulation that no one realized they were living in. It'd be like you and me right now. You're in a computer simulation. Everything is so real, you don't realize you're in the simulation because it's comfortable. If the zoo is big enough, if you put an animal in a cage, it's going to know it's in a cage. It wants to get out. It can have room to barely turn around. If it's in a zoo pen, it can live comfortably, but eventually sometimes the animals want to climb over the wall. But if you put it on a preserve, miles and miles and square miles where it's fenced in, it's just going to hit a fence, turn around, and go back the other direction. Well, if you had a simulation that was like that, you wouldn't maybe know you're even there, just like the animal preserve. And in that movie, they were sort of hinted toward what it was that they were living in, but they couldn't really be told because it was just so unbelievable. So they had to choose the blue pill and have everything that was coming to life for them as far as the truth disappear. And they would basically go back to sleep. They would be in the matrix. They'd stay there forever. They'd take the red pill and their world got shook up forever. And that's what like putting the glasses on is. And you can never force that red pill down anybody's throat. They will not take it. You can leave it there and you can lay it in front of them. And eventually maybe they'll choose because they've seen enough. They've seen enough people wake up and these people have information that they're like, okay, this person said this thing. I called them a crazy conspiracy theorist. And then it came through and then it happens again and it happens again. Eventually people are like, all right, I got to take this red pill. But you can't force them and you can't force them to put on those glasses. And there are people in the world who will deny that till they're blue in the face, and they will take that blue pill and stay blue in the face. And it amazes me, no matter how much information is staring certain people in the face, they will avoid it for the comfortable lie at all costs, and they will defend it. And that was one thing that was talked about in the Matrix, that some people were so entrenched in the Matrix, they were so wrapped up in it that their minds could not wrap the concept of what it was all about, and they would actually fight to defend it. And there was another pretty cool scene from that movie where this character Cypher, I know so much about this movie because it's literally like on my top 3 ever. Like it's tied for a 3-way tie for 3 of my favorite movies of all time. Probably the one I've seen the most, next to maybe Rocky IV. But there's a scene where the character Cypher, who is one of the rebels who makes it out early on before the movie even starts. He's like a historical character. He's miserable. He wants to go back into the Matrix. He wants to go back into the comfortable lie. He loved the life that he had before because it's like the life all of us are living now. In the quote unquote real world, these people are living in these ships and navigating through sewers in a world that is on the surface of the planet is all like an AI robot Terminator type thing. Again, go watch that movie, guys, if you haven't seen it. Those of you who've seen it, you're like, yes, keep going. So Cypher, he wants to get plugged back in so much that he goes to an agent of the system who are basically like the antivirus that's trying to snuff out the rebels and stuff, who plug back in every once in a while to wake more people up and try to destroy the Matrix. And in the scene in the movie, he wants to get plugged back in. He's making a deal. And basically he said he wants to, he'll hand over all the rebels and do what he's got to do and sabotage them, but he doesn't want to know anything. He wants to get put back in and doesn't want to remember a thing about anything. He wants to wake up in his bed and literally be someone famous and rich and not know any of the truth. He just wants to go back into the lie and have the lie almost come back even stronger than it was before he left. And he looks at this piece of steak and he's about to eat it. And in this bougie restaurant, he sits there and he says, I know this thing isn't real. And the computer simulation is telling me that this piece of steak is fantastic and everything. And that the Matrix is telling him that the whole thing is real. And he says the one thing he realized since he's been woken up is that ignorance is bliss.
Do we have a deal, Mr. Reagan?
I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
That scene is so symbolic because that's how everyone who doesn't even want to engage in the potential of the truth being some of these critical thinking points is basically acting. They know deep down that some of these truths exist, but acknowledging them means so much. Like it shatters your entire reality. And their ignorance to the truth is bliss. It literally is. It's comforting. It's secure. It's, it makes them feel safe. And, the false sense of illusion and protection that's brought onto them by the whole system of the lies makes them feel that way. So why would they ever want to escape it? Because again, if you escape it, there's no going back. There is no plugging back into it unless you literally forget everything you've ever learned. And the alternative reality is one that is initially very disturbing and painful. And there are some people who actually get into the truther movement. They go really deep into conspiracy theories and they live it constantly. And they start to get into these like doom and gloom predictions of Armageddon and, the rapture and so many different things of the world ending, right? It's almost like where every one of these things goes into the totalitarian globalism that's going to enslave humanity through technology and everything else. They go really deep, and their lives are almost like these paranoid timelines and scripts that lead to this very bleak picture of the future, and these things are going. I have a relative that was very much that way. He used to talk to me about this stuff a lot when I was a kid. And the thing is, even not even just when I was a kid, like when I was even in my 20s, and starting to realize how corrupt even just our little area was, and seeing people who were in positions of political power and stuff, and how they manipulated a lot of stuff to just get stuff that benefited them. I already saw it, and I learned a lot at a very young age, and had significant battles toward administrations in my very early 20s. It was quite a lesson to learn. And I knew that some of the stuff that this relative talked to me about was true. And I'm like, I'm aware of this stuff. Like I'm aware of what the New World Order is rumored to be. George Bush even talked about it. The original, George Bush, the first president, Bush, he talked about the New World Order, and it was pretty nuts. Like I'd seen some of that stuff over the years, but when you focus on it so much, it lowers your vibe. It drags you down. So there's that balance between knowing the truth and just getting so immersed in it that the picture of the world is nothing but this just bleak tipping point of, you're just about to go over the roller coaster, and the rest of this thing at the bottom of that roller coaster is a brick wall, right? They live in that place all the time. And it's a painful process. When you first learn the truth, you've got to learn the stuff, and you go through that sort of shock, but eventually you have to kind of let it go. You know it's there, and then you live a most fulfilling life that you possibly can. It is a painful process. I'll say that. It took maybe a few years to let the info in and then let it process out. Like, oh, here's just another BS thing that they're putting us through. And it's painful, because every bit of growth is actually painful. It's painful to push yourself up a mountain when you're climbing a mountain upslope. And, it's painful to give birth. It's painful to give, to put yourself in physical conditioning, give everything you've got to get in, like fight ready or anything for an athletic contest. It is painful. You're going to go through muscle burns, injuries, aches and pains, everything. But once the pain is over, you recover from it, and you're a completely new person in whatever way that means in that certain circumstance. And when I realized the truth of the world around me, and the more I discovered more truths from being open-minded, it shattered the perception that I once had. And it was a very dark place to be in, because it meant that the world was a fairly hostile place run by very bad people. And it has been for quite a long time, and it's continuing to get worse. And their grasp on the human species is just getting tighter, and they take away more and more things any chance they possibly get. But as with everything, like I said, like there's balance. And if you know your history, if you know what the real history is, and not the one that was brought to you by the victors of wars and the people who manipulated education and everything that really, really happened with this world, you start to see that the time we live in is a new cycle of a very old paradigm of operating, where the power over the many is in the hands of the few, and it's basically there through consent. There are 8 billion people wherever we're at right now in this world, and the power lies in like 50 people. So just picture what that looks like. Every one of them controls an army, and if every one of those people in that army lays down their arms and refuses to fight against their fellow man, what happens? The house of cards crumbles. It's one of the main reasons why I walked away from law enforcement. Was I did not want to be the hand of anybody who was potentially corrupt. And there were so many bad people that I saw throughout the years that were not there for the reason I was. I was there to do good. I was there to help people in some of their darkest times. I was there to potentially save lives of people and just do whatever I could. And there are some people who are there for very self-serving purposes. And that's a small scale of it. It goes on to grander scales, that for some reason that human nature of getting a hold of a position of power and exploiting it is just there, and it's inherent in so many different people that get into those positions of power. And it's a very unfortunate truth. And that truth is being very much exposed, and a new paradigm needs to emerge from it all, and a new group of leaders needs to come out to leave this world in a much more heart-centered and, I guess, egoless type of way, where it's there in a general sense of service to others rather than a service to self. And that takes a lot of sacrifice, and it takes a whole different type of person. And unfortunately, right now, we're in this cyclic thing where those types of people keep stepping in because other people like them help step in. But the more that people like myself, I will toot my own horn on this one, that the more people that are like myself that are willing to listen and listen to the critics and listen to the things that aren't going right and do what you can to try to change that for the greater good, those are the types of people that need to get into the positions of power. And it's a tough place that I've tried to balance out in, wanting to sort of bow out of politics, because it's difficult and time consuming, and it doesn't feel like it gives much back at a certain point, even on the small scale. But there are many people out there who want to do the right thing. And the more of those people that step up to do the right thing and are not willing to turn a blind eye to the very obvious things that aren't going good in this world, that's how things are going to shift and change. This phase of human history, I feel like, isn't a very pleasant one if you look at it up close. But the perspective of any given situation changes based on the lens you look at it through. Alan Watts once said this,
which is the different points of view you get when you change your level of magnification. That is to say, you can look at something with a microscope and see it a certain way. You can look at it with the naked eye and see it in a certain way. You look at it with a telescope and you see it in another way. Now, which level of magnification is the correct one? Well, obviously, they're all correct. But they're just different points of view. You can, for example, look at a newspaper photograph under a magnifying glass, and where with the naked eye you will see a human face, with the magnifying glass you will just see a profusion of dots, rather meaninglessly scattered. But as you stand away from that collection of dots, which all seem to be separate and apart from each other, they suddenly arrange themselves into a pattern. And you see that these individual dots add up to some kind of sense. Now you'll see at once from this illustration that maybe you may add up to some kind of sense that is not apparent to you in your ordinary consciousness. When we examine our bloodstreams under a microscope, we see there's one hell of a fight going on. All sorts of microorganisms are chewing each other up.
And we're going to look at a few things that people need to look into themselves with a microscope first. Because when we uncover those things and we look at them really closely, things will definitely change. Your perspective will definitely change on the entire world. And when I say that, I mean, when you look into these things, use something other than mainstream news to tell you how it is. Or Google, like people have used that as an actual adjective now, or a verb. That you're going to go Google things. Like it's a verb now of looking things up. So do something other than look it up in the mainstream, and look it up through several different sources. And actually, when you've decided on something, try and look up the alternative opinion on it. That's what I've done lately. I argue that a lot with people, and I'll believe in something they believe in, and I'll argue the opposite side just to see why they believe what they believe in, to see if we align on the origins of our belief rather than just aligning in the belief itself. Because those companies, the mainstream news, Google, all of them, they're owned by the same people at the very top, and the information is manipulated. BlackRock, Vanguard, these massive companies are all owned by the same people at the very top. They're a majority owners of stock in pretty much everything if you dig into them. I mean, they own it all. And those that are in control of those companies also control the news that you get. And the false division, it's laughable between CNN and Fox and MSNBC. Those two opposing sides between the left news and the right news, they're owned by the same people at the very top, except they're the puppet masters that project something far left and project something far right. So people get tribal, and they're not actually looking for the truth. They're just looking at whatever their side says and arguing with the other side. And when you look at it with the microscope, that's the view that you get. And everything in this universe has polarity. Everything has a yin and the yang. So you look at the yin and the yang that you have between that CNN and that Fox and the left and the right. But everything, if it's two halves of a whole, well, you zoom out, usually the micro is the macro as well. What is above, as above, so below. So you take those two halves of the whole, the left and the right. When you zoom out, you have this shape. Well, that new shape becomes the half of another huge whole. So what is the ultimate whole that those left and right make? Well, it's a division. That's all it is. It is just division. Because if you're dividing and you're fighting infighting in that little circle that you're trapped in between the left and the right, the yin and the yang, you're not fighting what the bigger whole is. That whole thing right there is division. Well, what's the other half of that division? It's unity. They don't want the other half of that bigger picture. They want you infighting. They want you divided in each other, because unity in truth, unity in seeking truth, will ultimately uncover the lies. And when that happens, the house of card absolutely crumbles. That lens between looking at it with a microscope and looking at it with a telescope, when you're looking at something extremely small like the quantum world, or something huge like the universe and general relativity and the things of the larger sizes, you have to look at it through a completely different lens. And when you realize that these senses of division are there to keep us infighting, so we don't focus on the top, you'll stop looking at those other sides. I don't know if you're familiar with the jarred ants analogy. It's one that's been brilliant. It's been circulating a lot on the internet lately, but it's true and it's absolutely brilliant. So if you take a jar of red ants and black ants and you put them all, you put them in the jar together, they will not attack each other. That is until you take that jar and you start to shake it up. And the mainstream news is nothing but someone shaking the jar. And if you don't realize that, you're going to bite the other ant. You're going to bite the ant of the other color. No matter how you feel, it's the same thing. No matter what you feel, no matter what subject it is, whether it's gun rights or border control, left or right, you're going to go after the ant of the other color. There's a common sense solution to each one of the things that we are all so divided on. In a conversation of unity, trying to find what is mutually beneficial for the all is what will help get us past that division. Gun confiscation is a huge one. The whole gun rights thing. It's a hard no. Like, the countries that have given up their rights, if you look through history, the countries that have given up their weapons have fallen to totalitarianism. The laws are not going to be followed by those that are criminals. Right now, there's laws against murder and hurting people and stuff, and they don't follow those. And I've heard people argue against that. Well, I'm sorry, that's the fact of the matter. And that our highest rates of gun crime in this country are in areas with some of the strictest gun control, and it's nuts. It's the law-abiding citizens that follow the law. And common sense gun legislation, I'm not saying that we don't need it. I'm saying that common sense, there are some stupid, ridiculous laws. And just up the road in the two states that I'm just south of, in Vermont, New Hampshire and stuff, there's one of those states where you can literally go to the back of a hardware store and buy a gun with hardly any red tape. You can go to these gun shows and buy stuff. Like, all of that is obviously not right. So if we apply common sense solutions to a lot of these hot ticket items that are dividing people, and people meet in the middle, that's what's going to get us there. That's what's going to find us a solution that it's like, okay, it's something as opposed to nothing. And it's not someone confiscating your guns. They're not coming for your guns. It's just adding a little something that closes loopholes. And that's what people get so divisive on, because that jar gets shaken up and their side gets all riled up, and people get divisive and they draw a dividing line and become tribal. People are divided on so many different things, whether it's race, which a lot of that is fabricated through the news as well. When people spout the all lives matter stuff, yes, that's true. Like, all lives do matter. But when they say save the whales, no one ever said all sea life matters, right? But the whales were getting screwed at the time. So it was like, no, we're focusing on the whales for the moment. And the same thing goes for what that whole effort was all about. But at the same time, let's also look at the false division about how organizations like Black Lives Matter did hardly anything for the actual Black community. There's a lot of leaders in the Black community who were like, yes, that was an absolute fraud. They did nothing for us. And they're all very upset about it, because it was a huge setback for the things that the original organizers and the people who have spent their entire lives trying to go for equal rights and eliminate racism and everything attached to it, it set them back. Just that one organization that claimed to be there for everybody. And, its leaders paid each other millions while they filed for bankruptcy. These are the inconvenient truths for a lot of people that got all polarized in these fights, and people who were racist in a way that didn't want to see the BLM signs and stuff everywhere. And it was like, it created the division. But then ultimately, this agency ended up filing for bankruptcy, and they were like $9 million in debt just recently, but their organizers all got multi-million-dollar salaries, yet gave nothing back to the community they seemed to want to benefit. That was, the guise of why they were out there collecting money from everybody. They had nothing to show for it except big salaries and BLM themselves, big lavish mansions. And its founders just benefited off it. That was pretty much it. The brother of the founder of Black Lives Matter, who had zero security experience, by the way. I'm somebody who was in the law enforcement and security field for many years. This guy was paid over $800,000 for security services for the organization. Yet that was not his expertise by any means. He was like a college grad who had nothing as far as knowledge goes. It was a huge fraud that propagated racism and set back its entire effort so far. And I've heard so many black leaders talk about the travesty of that entire thing. But it was basically something that spun up a huge amount of division. And it was a huge setback, and it was hijacked by greed. And, it was something that a lot of people in society ended up further divided from. And it's a shame to see something like that happen. The ultimate truth is there's a lot of people out there just like that in so many different areas. Our politicians are full of this. Corporations are full of it. They're more interested in money than human life and the quality of human life, plain and simple. Modern Western life at this time is really a lie. It's amazing. So many people are trying to come to this country right now. And then when they get here, they're realizing that they didn't walk onto paved golden streets when they got here. And it's like, we came all this way for this. Like, this isn't the land of milk and honey like we heard about. And it's slowly starting to fall apart from what it used to be. And the truth is that the life that we were sold and told for so many years, and to fit in this perfect puzzle into society, it's no longer what resonates with people anymore. The whole dream, the whole aspect of, go to school for all these years, fit into the perfect puzzle piece of society, how they want you to work for 40 years and then retire when all your best years have passed you by. It doesn't work for people anymore, just because they have to work multiple jobs. And now they're trying, like people like Ben Shapiro, who's, super right wing. And the thing is, if I have a view opposing the left, people accuse me of being right. I'm sorry. I'm independent, right down the middle. I took a political aptitude test and it leaned slightly dead center toward right and conservative, but also, I forgot what the other part was. It was like independent, it was in the middle of so many different things. There's people like Ben Shapiro who I completely don't agree with. This guy is saying that the retirement age being 65 is ridiculous and that they need to raise it or eliminate it altogether. And it's like, no, absolutely not. The only solace sometimes people have is that at age 65, after they've run a jackhammer or had to work with their hands and they can barely move anymore, that society is going to take care of them at a certain point, that they served their purpose and now they're going to try and relax and enjoy themselves for a while. And people like this guy who's barely worked a hard day in his life is saying that they need to work even longer and harder. It's like, that's not the American dream, guys. Like, life was meant to be so much more than that. Life is meant to be so much more than what we were told and sold that it was going to be. And that we're supposed to live these lives and serve society until we're no longer useful anymore. We as kids, I guess we have no idea what's going on and we just follow what trusted people are telling us. And I guess we're told to do that from very young ages, and it just translates onward so that we follow our parents. We follow the people that are further up in us and the elders and the years, and they tell us how things are supposed to be and we just follow along with it. And so in that responsibility, as I age gracefully, not willingly, but gracefully, as things progress and I gain my experience, how about that? My XP goes up. I'm there to tell people, like even my son, he's 16 and a half, junior in high school. There's no way he can determine what he wants to be. And even if he does decide, I've told him, you can switch your careers up. You can go to college for something. I'd rather you don't, and decide you want to do something else later. But take your time and like figure out what lights you up, and you're going to do that. And if it's sometime your mind changes and something else lights you up, then you're going to go after that too. You have full on permission to live your life. When you have children, you have to be that responsive parent. You've got to be there for them and try and set them up for the best possible life ever. And a lot of us weren't given that, but a lot of us are starting to unplug and want to live lives outside of that box, realizing that living outside of that city block and off the concrete path and embracing something bigger and a better connection. It's craving more than the inclusion that this world, I guess, demands. You got to have people, and you got to have likes, and you got to have everything else. That sometimes the seclusion is actually where you can find yourself. Sometimes embracing the seclusion is actually where the most rewarding existence lies. And if you want to live this life, and you live that lifestyle, and you find a huge amount of meaning, sometimes people think you're a weirdo because of it, that you're a little bit off, until people actually experience it for themselves and they see what it's like, and they're like, wow, I guess this homestead stuff isn't so weird at all. It's, it's better than being in a concrete cube and going from the concrete cube to the concrete tube underground back to my little hole in the wall in the city. And that's how I spend my entire waking life. And people are waking up to that. There is just so much of a restrictive existence that I guess was given to us as a truth for so long. Fear is restrictive. Love is expansive. Love is connection. That's another thing in one of the Matrix movies, is that Neo, the main character, who is like supposed to be the chosen one, he hears one of the programs talk about love. And he said, well, I've never heard a program talk about love before. And the program's like, love, like you understand it. You actually have the misconception that you think love is an emotion. Love is the connection that the word implies, and that the emotion sometimes implies. And that rang true for me so much. I thought about that for such a long time, that we can say that we love somebody without having the emotional feeling of love. They're two totally separate things. I absolutely love my wife, but I also love people that are close to me, not in a romantic way, that there is a connection and a love for wanting people to have a greater life. Like, why do you do what you do? Like, what is your drive to do these long podcasts and do these talks and do all the stuff that you do? And it's like, well, because I just want the world to be a better place. Well, why? What do you care? What do you care that other people are, they have the ability to do things for themselves? And it's like, well, yes and no. There's been a lot of deception, and people are living lives and they just don't seem genuinely happy. I listen to the words that people say when I'm walking through the grocery store and the mall, and I'm shoulder to shoulder with people, and the conversations that people have are not ones that are enlightening and inspiring, and just their tones and the way I hear people talk to each other and about each other. It's like, that's why I do what I do, because right now I don't hear people talking from a place of love. I hear them talking from a place of division and fear and restrictiveness, and that just that compaction of their emotional state. And love is that connection. It is an expanding state. It is something that is connective. And, I guess the whole time frame of COVID expended that so much. Like, it just enhanced the restrictedness of everybody. Like, everybody literally secluded themselves from each other, locked themselves away. And it just brought on the state of fear like I've never seen before. It was even worse than after 9/11. And after 9/11, people gave up their freedoms for security, and they hated certain groups without a whole lot of justification. They hated people of Muslim descent just because there was a group of bad people that supposedly flew into the buildings and did all sorts of stuff, when there's a lot of evidence showing that our government was involved in some of that. And there was all this patriotism, and people just, it was just such a fearful time. It was pretty crazy. And COVID was a huge setback in dividing people, not only, I guess, ideologically, because a lot of the aspects of what came out of COVID somehow got hijacked and politicized on purpose, in my own opinion. Again, as soon as one side got a little tribal, the other side was told to say this about this aspect, and you just saw people just going at it. It was like, if you wore a mask, you were this, and if you didn't, you were that, and if you didn't want to get a vaccine, you were this. And it was literally tribal. It was down a party line, and it was crazy to see. And, only for us to find out years later that all of it was literally manufactured. The whole COVID thing is amazing to me. And I've kept so quiet about it for so long, just because there was news from everywhere. And there was a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. But as the time has gone on, I have looked at it with very clear eyes and have been able to make my own determination. I stood strong and stepped back from everything. And in my public roles, I did what I had to do in the best places. But I was even accused of a dereliction of my duty because I had certain opinions that I shared on the podcast and on other shows from time to time. I haven't spoken about it much on this show, but someone heard me say something and post something, and they basically told me I had to take it down. And I was like, you damn well sure I'm not going to take it down. There's one thing you can guarantee, is if you tell me to do something and I don't want to do it, you damn well right I'm not going to do it. I'm going to have you make me do it and take legal action on you otherwise, because that's my freedom of speech. And people backed right off. But having the ability to dissect stuff now and look at it, like I've been able to see a lot of stuff. Like the flu completely went away during that time frame because they had no testing in the beginning of COVID. And in the beginning of it, flu A and flu B were testing positive, and people were using those stats because there was no COVID tests. And now years later, they want you to treat it just like the flu. It was this political meeting I was in the other night where new stats came out and they were talking about new guidance for us from town government side. And they said they want you to treat it just like a flu. And I literally leaned to my microphone and I go, imagine that. Like, yes, it was something that early on I drank the Kool-Aid, but then after the fear of it settled down, like I literally was bringing my groceries home and spraying 409 on our tables out on the deck because I was afraid of bringing this deadly virus into my own house. I was there, guys. I was right in it. But as time went on, I collected data and it was like, okay, nope, this isn't the way that it's supposed to be. But some people stayed in that mindset. Even locally, we caught cities right near us spreading fear like you wouldn't believe. A city right near my hometown, they were falsifying death rates for the sake of collecting that COVID money for every death that happened. And after they got caught, they had to publish a correction of their death rates, saying that people who died with the virus, like post-mortem tests showed they were positive, even though they died in a car crash. They did not die from the virus. So they had to publish it in the newspaper, and it ended up literally being like a 2x3-inch square in the newspaper. I have it still. I actually clipped it because when I heard that it was getting published, I kept an eye on the paper. And lo and behold, on like page 3, there it was in this dinky little square that hardly anybody even saw. And all you saw was like the fear porn from St. Johns Hopkins University, talking about, how many death rates were going up and all that kind of stuff. It's all you saw was this ticker about the death rates just climbing. But just recently, a Johns Hopkins University professor, Marty McCary, he testified in front of Congress on a ton of different stuff. And he was kind of a whistleblower on all of the facts that were spouted during COVID. And most of which, if you said the things that he testified in front of Congress on just a few weeks ago, you'd get banned from social media. And the guy's information that he testified on in front of the entire Congress, it was stuff that people have been saying all along. And how many people were regretting it now for following that fear and misinformation and not listening to what other people were saying was the potential truth? Because the people who were saying potential truth were being called murderers. They were spreading misinformation. They were people who were putting stuff out there that ended up turning out not to be true, but they were demonized like they were spreading some sort of politically motivated misinformation. And anybody who just said, use caution, guys, look at this from a fair and objective standpoint. Many of us were there before jumping the gun and going too far down with these narratives that just didn't add up. And other people didn't do it just because it got really political. And then one side goes against another. And then once that starts, it's really hard to stop. And just now, years later, there's a lot of consequences that are coming out that are making people realize, like, wow, what a lesson. And I guess that's the most important part, is that the damage has been done, the stuff that's been said. There's a lot of people who just want to forgive and forget. And it's like, it's really hard not to. At least for me, it's really hard not to. There's a lot of people who are like, no, I'm not going to forget that you made me miss my mom's funeral for what turned out to be something like a flu. And I'm not going to forget that you said I don't deserve a hospital bed just because I don't want to go and take an experimental medication right now. I want to see what the safety trials say. And most of those safety trials had misinformation as well for the sake of putting it out there and earning a lot of money for the people who developed it. It was pretty crazy stuff. It was a huge lesson on the psychology of humans. And it was something that was hard to watch and at the same time somewhat fascinating for someone like me. But it's crazy, stuff that happens throughout the country. It's still, we see so many different pieces of division, but the castles are crumbling for sure. And some of these places that were very, very divisive, they were spreading the division very much and hiding the truth so much. They're starting to crumble. Like the castles are definitely falling down. Places like California, New York, and Chicago, even right here in Massachusetts, a lot of different things are starting to fall apart because of the policies of the people who try to create so much division, and it's crazy to watch. But those were also the places that were ready to ban people and demonized a lot of the free-thinking folks and people who lost their jobs and their careers, and folks who are starting to win, like police unions and stuff like that. I know some people very near to me who fought for their jobs and now are all getting back pay because they're being proven to be right. All the stuff that they were put through, judges and courts are starting to decide it, but you don't hear any of that stuff happening. But I'm telling you, folks, it's happening. It's out there. So before you demonize me, before you unfollow my stuff because you don't like where I'm going, dig into it yourself. Like, these things are actually happening, and it's very unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it did happen. Just the most important part is that we learn from it. That's what it is. Instead of pointing fingers, really, because some of you who were really unkind, I can look at you with sympathy and actually sympathize where you're at, that they did a really good job duping a lot of you. The most important part is that if you acted a certain way and you're realizing that it was unjustified, like own it up, apologize to people, let it go, and come at this type of thing if it were ever to come up again, whether it's an alien invasion or like, well, all the different things that people are saying are going to be false flags, because they have done false flags in the past, you guys. It's part of the unfortunate truth. It's just, if anything ever happens in the future that makes you wonder what the true narrative is on it, question those things first. Don't forget the lessons that we've learned throughout these last few years, because it's that critical thinking, the pumping of the brakes just for a second, just to gather your facts before you get tribal, that could mean the difference in life and death sometimes. So use it as discernible learning experience and discern that all that information that could be coming out there, because the truth is sometimes hard to find. And, like I said in the beginning, the truth will set you free. There are things that you can do that are morally right, and not following certain political agendas sometimes is just the right thing to do. I mean, it's crazy what we've seen happen. I mean, you look at San Francisco in California, the place was going to hell in a handbasket, and crime was through the roof. Homelessness encampments were everywhere. It was a beautiful city at one point, and it just turned into a literal pile of shit. Like, there was piles of feces in the streets. It was disgusting. Like, you couldn't walk there. It just almost looked like it was like an apocalyptic scene. It was insane. Until a world leader, China's President Xi Jinping, decides that he's going to come to town. And when he comes in for a visit, what happens? All the homeless encampments disappear. All the poop on the streets disappears. The city was sparkling clean. And it was like, what just happened? Why did this just happen the way that it did? And not because it was the right thing to do, because if it was, you would have done it all along. Like, obviously you had the ability to do this, but as a leader, you chose not to until somebody went and came by. And Governor Newsom, who sorry guys, if you like him, I'm sorry. I don't see a single thing. He's got some things that I definitely like that he has said against the right, but there is so much. This is one of the biggest things. He just seems like a used car salesman in a cheap Armani suit. This guy says, well, when you have guests come over, you got to clean up your house. It's like, yeah, but if you live like a hoarder and you garbage ceiling to floor, and the only time you ever clean your house is because someone's coming over, then you're doing the wrong thing. Like, this is not the way that you're supposed to live. And that's not the way you're supposed to govern a state either. I hope that guy just goes nowhere in politics after this. Him and Justin Trudeau, there's some of these guys that just, not just guys, there's men and women. There's some people in these positions who have just demonstrated they don't belong there, and hopefully they're moving on. But when that's your own city and that's the way that you're going to govern your state, it's an appalling thing. And when you can speak up against stuff like this, kudos to you. But along the way, accounts got censored. And that's why you've seen someone like Elon Musk go out there. I'm not a huge Elon Musk fan, but him buying Twitter and exposing what happened as far as the censorship goes on the behalf of the United States government, that blew my mind. It was a straight up violation of freedom of speech to have political dissent, to have the White House and the government get involved in suppressing people's free speech. And great, I've never been on Twitter. I've heard it's nothing but a cesspool. It always was, and it's just gotten worse. And I've seen Instagram do the same thing with, something that it has now that's supposed to look like Twitter. It's nothing but just garbage now. So all of those social media sites, you guys heard me say I'm not fans of them, although I'm getting wrapped up into a little bit of the TikTok stuff. But again, TikTok has a huge attack going on it. And I have a whole episode coming out about this from somebody who is a legal expert on it. But when you get both sides of the aisle wanting to suppress this app under the guise of, China's coming after us and stuff, you have any idea the amount of lobbying that comes from Meta, who owns Facebook and Instagram, that is paying for the politicians that are jumping on this bill to ban TikTok? There's so much information that cannot be suppressed because TikTok is so quick and it's so hard. That's the reason why they don't want it there. A lot of the stuff that comes out as far as the information avalanche now is through TikTok. So, if they're going to allow certain social media platforms to exist the ones that are funding people, you have to wonder why. And if you're not asking those questions and you're just going along with it saying, yeah, China's bad and they're looking at all of our stuff. It's like, well, no, China really is bad. I'm not disagreeing with you there at all. But you got to realize that we're not also squeaky clean. The people who own these tech companies, they don't have your best interest at heart. And the suppression of the freedom of speech, the suppression of the truth that comes out. I mean, if they're all gaining traction and agreeing on something, that should make you question everything. If anything makes you question anything, it's the fact they're all agreeing on something on both sides of the aisle. It's pretty nuts. But you got to look at the sponsors. I wish these guys wore coats like NASCAR drivers do, because they'd have patches all over them that said Pfizer and Facebook and everything else. It's crazy. The issues of content moderation that happen on these platforms is absolutely ridiculous. Actually, one of the things, I'm going to wrap up in a few, but one of the things that's really blown my mind lately is Robert F. Kennedy. Like, this guy is actually extremely brilliant. The fact that he has been able to amass the following that he has, the fact that he's been able to leave the Democratic Party and gain such an independent following, and that he's gaining in the polls. The guy is actually very brilliant. At first, I thought he was a very strong anti-vaxxer. I thought he was a little too far into the whole conspiracy theory world. But then as I listened to him a lot more, I'm like, this guy's actually one of the smartest people I think has ever run for office. Like, he is absolutely amazing. And of course, I have a soft spot for the Kennedy family. I got a postcard right here. It says, okay to dream. I picked stuff up like this when I'm at the Cape all the time. That was JFK holding his daughter. But down in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, that's where these people were all from. All the Kennedys, their legacies down there. So I had a soft spot for him. And the more I've listened to him, the more I absolutely love what he's been saying and what he's been working on. And that guy, the content moderation that went against him, from the moment that Biden took office, he immediately had the White House attack and censor him within, what was it, like 36 hours, I think, that they ended up finding out through the court case, that the White House put pressure on social media to remove and restrict his posts so people wouldn't see it. RFK sued the Biden administration and just recently won. But you didn't hear about it. It was very quiet. And he's out there on the campaign trail and he's talking about it. So I heard about it. I looked up the case. And I'm a legal nut. Like, I love reading case law and stuff like that. This case was amazing, and he actually won. And in the case, they called him misinformation. Everything that he was saying was misinformation. This, misinformation, that. They actually changed their rhetoric halfway through and called it malinformation instead, not misinformation, because the stuff that he was saying, if it was completely untrue, if they couldn't prove that it was false information, then they couldn't call it misinformation anymore. But when they couldn't prove that his information was misinformation because his data was true, they had to reclassify it as malinformation, saying that it was accurate, but it was damaging to the United States government and the information that they put out there. And it turned out to later be erroneous. So it was damaging to the U.S. government. So that's why they restricted him. Like, that alone should blow your mind. The fact that malinformation justified violating the Constitution for this guy, that it ended up turning out to be a very viable political candidate. I know I definitely will be voting for him, and he said a lot of stuff that if it was untrue, then he'd be getting a lot of lawsuits against him right now. He wrote a hugely damaging book called The Real Anthony Fauci. And if the stuff that was in that book was not true, he would be facing a defamation suit like you wouldn't believe. He literally put it cover to cover in print, and he hasn't faced a lawsuit yet from Fauci. So that means the stuff in the book was true. If it wasn't, he'd be getting sued all day long. But that has not happened. And that should tell you everything you need to know about so many different things of the last few years. And during RFK's, infamously but rarely circulated Joe Rogan episode, he said so many eye-opening things about pharmaceuticals and his time in, environmental activism and stuff that led him into like what mercury does to the body. And that eventually led into the mercury that was in vaccines and how that's connected to so many bad things. People called him an anti-vaxxer. He's got data to back everything up. So like, yes, he has turned into an anti-vaxxer from a guy who has been vaccinated and was fully behind the entire thing. And he's not against every vaccine. He's just against the ones that have been proven to not be beneficial, that there's harmful stuff in a lot of them with side effects that are starting to be completely measured in so many different ways. And I'm actually going to link that episode to this one, just because if you haven't heard that one, which likely you didn't, because his episode came out on June 15th of 2023. 2 days later, the Titan submarine thing happened, and that hijacked the news cycle completely. And all of the Joe Rogan clips that usually come out after one of his episodes comes out, all the little snippets and sound bites, nothing came out because it's all you saw was the stuff about the Titan for like 2 weeks. And eventually the cycle left it behind, and his whole episode didn't get the traction and circulation that it should have. But he is an amazing alternative for the lesser of two evils. So if you haven't looked into that guy, listen to that episode. I'll link the Joe Rogan episode in the show notes. It's fascinating. It's a very long one. It's episode 1999, which is also the same year that the Matrix came out. It's episode number 1999 of the Joe Rogan podcast. Matrix came out in 1999. So I found that was an interesting coincidence. No coincidence in this world, right? But yeah, RFK's mission, all the stuff that he's saying, if it could be rebuked as false information, then he'd be in a lot of trouble. And it's really very damaging to the powers that be and the established mainstream narrative on so many different things. And that might be why they're denying him Secret Service protection after about 5 attempts. And given the fact that he is a massive independent political candidate, probably one of the strongest ones, if not the strongest independent candidate in history, and they're denying him Secret Service protection, why? The fact that his uncle, JFK, was assassinated as president, and that his father, Robert F. Kennedy, was killed in his run for president, and they're going to deny this guy Secret Service protection. What does that tell you? Like that, again, back to that morally correct stuff. Is it morally correct? Was this a morally correct choice? Like, absolutely not. Why aren't they doing it? Like, actually, RFK, Bobby Kennedy, who's running for president right now, his father was killed right in front of him in California when he was a child. He saw the whole thing. And they won't even let him on the debate stage or get him Secret Service protection. And it just, the more I hear about him and everything else, it just makes me want to pull away from the mainstream altogether and almost give up my aspirations of wanting to do anything political, because it's just such a hard place to be. And my moral compass would, if I was even in his opposition, I'd be like, get this guy some Secret Service protection, the best of the best, because that family can't afford to have another loss. And that would be the morally correct thing to do. And I think that's what we all should be aiming for at this time in the world. But we don't. And it's amazing. Why not? I don't know. It's something that I'll probably never figure out. But so many of the different things that came up over the years regarding this entire subject. I mean, that episode blew my mind. So I highly recommend, one more time, go listen to that. I'll put that link in the show notes. But if you weren't aware of a lot of the things they talked about on there, it's going to absolutely blow your mind. So go in with an open mind and expect to have your minds blown. But to this day, I have not met a single person who, I guess, didn't listen to it and say, oh my God, like, I wish I had listened to this before I went out and took the COVID vaccine. I wish I listened to this before I just blindly let my kids' doctors just pump anything into their veins at any given point. Because we trust people. We put this blind trust in people that they're doing the right thing. And honestly, I don't think there's a lot of people in this world like doctors who are doing anything malicious. It's a system that they get educated on, and they think that they're doing the right things. And, they take that oath and do no harm. And I've met a lot of great people in the medical field. I just feel like there's an over-encompassing aspect of how they are governed and the things they have to do that prevents them from veering off the path. And we saw a lot of doctors who lost their entire careers because they veered off the path during COVID. But there's not a lot of people that I talked to along the way who, were given the pamphlets that told them what the risks were when they were taking certain experimental vaccines over the last few years. And the pharmaceutical companies were given an immunity from liability in the creation of that vaccine, but only under the guise that everybody who was going to be taking it had informed consent, meaning that you were aware of the risks, that they were not going to be liable if you were aware of what you were getting yourself into. And to this day, I've asked so many different people that had taken that COVID vaccine of all the different kinds, and they were never given the insert or told of the apparent risks that were on the inserts as well and what could happen to them. And a lot of people have had a lot of very serious side effects. I know several people had some serious injuries and a lot of lost loved ones and the died suddenly stuff that's taking young athletes' lives and stuff, all of a sudden, stuff we've never seen. And it's a crazy time to live in for sure. But yeah, I'm going to move off that subject just because it is one that it's an unfortunate reality that we're living in right now. And like I said, if we just happen to learn from some of the mistakes that were made, and we get a little bit more of empathy in this world for our fellow person. And the one thing in this world I think that is missing the most, that is the root of all of these different things, I think the world would be a much better place. The truth that the world almost celebrates a lack of empathy and morality is kind of a stark thing too. The 7 deadly sins are almost promoted when at a certain point they were demonized. And I'm not a huge person on the Bible. You guys know my personal thoughts on Christianity and the Bible and everything. But I don't know how many times in definitely this isn't a sin or anything, but morality, just fellow care towards our fellow man. I don't know how many times in the past few years I've had people just close a door in my face at like a grocery store when I stopped to open the door for literally everybody, and people let the door just close in my face, and I pretty much open it up for everybody that I possibly can. Why should I heard people even say that when I've said something about it, like, well, why should I hold the door open for anybody? They don't hold the door open for me, and I don't know you, you don't know me, and it's everybody for themselves in this world. And it's like, that's the problem. We need to shift that mindset. Given the chance, I do it for strangers all the time, and it's almost like they're surprised by it. It's kind of strange. It's kind of sad at the same time, but certain demographics would paint that as chauvinistic as well, and that blows my mind. We need to bring back just general politeness and morality into this world and realize that the 7 sins, maybe they were there for a reason. I have my ideology beliefs when it comes to that whole Christian Bible stuff and how it was altered and everything, but some of the things I think still hold true to how we should be treating each other as far as humanity goes. But this world right now, adultery is celebrated. And, I could definitely see why that would be a bad thing and why they said in the Bible that it shouldn't be done. When it comes to greed, it's promoted as well. Like, get as much money as you can and screw everybody else. Gluttony, lust, sloth, fast food, and celebrating not being healthy and porn at your fingertips at every possible turn. And the doom and gloom of doom scrolling is there. Like, it's a dopamine hit, and it just leads to people being lazy and not using their minds, rather than you get your dopamine hit that way, rather than going out and doing something where you got the rush of climbing something and overcoming something, building something, creating something with your hands, anything, instead of just sitting there staring at a screen, scrolling for the next small dopamine hit. It's literally like a war on your consciousness, and it's just an interesting thing to discover. And when I've heard somebody talk about this, that's what opened my eyes up to stop doing it myself. Because sometimes you don't even realize you're doing it until someone points it to your face and you realize you're doing it. So one side, I guess, has to try and teach the other. And hopefully that spreads like a virus. A good one. But yeah, I feel like World War III has already begun, you guys. And I feel like it's a war on your consciousness. It is a war for your mind. The fear and division and the scarcity and lack, all of those things that are out there to keep you restricted are what is on the forefront all of the time on the most influential platforms that are out there and out and about. And, all the emotions, if you look at the Hawkins scale of consciousness that are on the lower end, it is all the things that are promoted in today's world. And if we can rise above those and we can recognize it and consciously do the things that we can do to get us away from those lower spectrums of operating, I think that's what will shift this entire world around. We are one gigantic conscious organism, like a school of fish in the ocean. They all manage to turn a certain way, and birds flock in certain patterns. It's an amazing thing to see. And the whole 100th monkey effect, I've talked about that eons ago. I think in the first episode of first season of the show. Go look that one up. I can actually link that one as well. I'm going to write that down because that is a great episode. I've talked about that a few times. And for those listeners that are new, some of these things I might talk about, you'll be like, what the hell is this 100th monkey thing? But yeah, the more of a critical mass and a mass consciousness, more people learn about something, it tends to permeate through that particular organism, whether it's a certain species of monkeys, a certain species of fish, or whatever. They move as a gigantic organism. And there's no reason to believe that we're any different. So if we can transcend some of the division and the madness and we do more inclusion and connectedness, I think that's what transform. That is the only hope I feel like we actually have at this point in this world. This universe is wacky. We only see about 1% of all of the visible things in the universe. The visible light, the spectrum that goes from the infrared on one side to the X-ray on the other. We only see a small fraction of that we perceive as like that rainbow. And there are certain organisms that can see outside of those spectrums of light. And I feel like the limited light spectrum that we see is analogous to what we actually see in this world. But there are ways that we can see into those other spectrums. We just have to have the tools that can help us. Our perception has to be enhanced by something else. And whether you think everything is a conspiracy theory that I talked about today, or, you know, maybe on the surface you do, but then you give a side eye to it, that is the tool that you actually need. The tool of discernment and the tool of critical thinking is what will help us see more than just that narrow band of that limited spectrum of the things that the world wants to put in front of us to keep us in a certain place for a certain amount of time. And as people wake up more and see things that we need to shake off as a species, and the things that we need to change as accepted norms, and the things that we need to push back on and fight for our fellow person and fight for our existence here. No matter what you agree with or disagree with, we need to fight for other people's rights to live a life that they want to live. Whether you agree with someone changing their pronouns or whatever, it's irrelevant. If you have respect for someone's freedom and you want them to respect yours, we have to just have that mutual respect for everybody and a right to live a life that they want to live. Some people were just born a certain way in a skin that doesn't feel like it's theirs. And we have to encourage people to live a life that is the most resonant with who they want to be, and not trod down on other people's rights to do the same. If we have that mutual respect for each other, that's what's going to get us there. And the mutual respect of one person's point of view, no matter how strong you might feel about a certain thing and that you know the absolute truth, the open mind to be able to discern that the truth might not be exactly what you think it is, and that you have the ability to look it up and you have the ability to potentially fight for that truth until you get to the bottom of it, is what we need to get out there into the world. You know, we need to demand truth and justice, because that used to be the American way and we're letting it slip. There's a reason why people are fighting to get into this country, and we are really the last holdout for freedom and to make our dreams come true. A lot of other places in this world are really bad places, and we need to maintain all of that here as much as possible. And unity is the only way we can get there. I mean, division is the only way we can pretty much guarantee that we never will, and that things are going to continue to devolve. So a lot of us have to come to grips with that fact and the reality of where the world is right now and what the truth actually is, and fight and wake up as many people as we possibly can. And I guess that's why I wanted to kick off season 5 on that. It is not an absolutely enlightening episode. And even though I'm theming this season on truth, it will not be circulated all around this, but this was a big one. And some of the people who are coming on for this season, I've already got a lot of great guest episodes done. And I've got quite a few people on my guest list over there that are on their way on, and some very great truth tellers. One of them coming up is Faust Chicho. He's amazing. Runs the Far Out with Faust podcast. So when you guys see that one, keep an eye out for that. The guy is a wealth of information. My God, the stuff that I've heard that guy talk about has blown my mind. So, yeah, it's going to be an amazing season, guys. That's all I can really say. And I'm thankful to you all. If you're still here, an hour and 24 minutes is what I got on my ticker so far. If you're still here listening to this episode and I haven't lost you yet, stay strong and keep fighting for the truth, and keep doing what you can do to awaken people to their potential, like I'm trying to do as well. I feel like that's what certain people's purpose was on this planet. And I think at a certain point, we all need to make sure that's our purpose. And we need to unify the best that we possibly can. And if we're sitting on our hands and we're restricting ourselves due to worrying about hurting people's feelings and losing followers and the risk of offending somebody, well, so be it. Sometimes that might be what it is, because the side effect is you could wake up 5 times as more people as, might close themselves off to the information that you have. Certainly not my intention. I don't want to offend anybody, but shaking up their ideological beliefs and having them realize that things are a lot different than many of us might tend to want to believe. That hard truth is just something that needs to come out. So there it is. Tune into yourself and tune into your intuition, and figure out what's going on deep down at the heart of every situation, and try to live the life of truth, because the truth will set you free. So I'm going to head out on this one and leave you guys with a song from my boys from Raw.
Close the season out with one from them. This one is another one off of the album Intercorrupted. This one is called Divided. Find yourself means digging deep into your truth, whatever that is. What is hidden will come to light, and the light always overtakes the dark. In a room full of darkness, it only takes one small flame to overtake it all. Light always wins.
This waits too long. I don't wanna have to see you crawling, you falling down, while I just stand around. You vaulted out, so you didn't have to hold my sorrow now. So can you show me how I find a stone that I can carry all the way, and all alone I make the journey, 'cause I just can't stay. If I decide that I am broken, will I lose my past? If I decide it's time to end it, will it break too fast? And you might be divided by the things that you know, all the subtle surprises by the devil below. And you might be divided by the war in your mind, but you can't keep on hiding from the world you designed. There's no words you can say to wish it away. Hey, wish it away. Is it on top of me? All of this latency. I don't wanna talk about it. I don't wanna set it free. 'Cause the excuses that are in my head make it seem to avoid it all. Is it better just to play dead and take the psychosocial letter off? How am I supposed to choose between the truths that I never knew? Every time that I turn away, I deny what I put you through. And you might be divided by the things that you know, all the subtle surprises by the devil below. And you might be divided by the war in your mind, but you can't keep on hiding from the world you designed. There's no words you can say. Walk past the outside line and hold until you find a code that you can break, a breath that you can take. Disrupt the simple mind, throw out the thoughts that bind. Just wait until they're gone, so they don't tell you you're wrong again. Running so and it's there to be found. You might be divided by the things that you know, all the subtle surprises by the devil below. And you might be divided by the war in your mind, but you can't keep on hiding from the world you designed. There's no words you can say to wish it away.